The 1960s dazzled with premieres, but behind the scenes stubborn rumors of invisible barriers lingered. 10 contested episodes, tied to specific dates and names, show how one line in studio paperwork could alter on-screen partnerships and someone's career. John Wayne and The Alamo. By 1960, John Wayne's name and prospects for his next pictures hinged on how The Alamo handled Texas's racial history. Where does patriotic epic end and exclusion begin? Who's visible on screen and who isn't? Beginning in August 1959, as Alamo Village outside Brackettville became a little San Antonio, working papers and casting lists show adjustments. Tejano, or Spanish-speaking Texans. Roles were pared back, accents and dialogue pushed their contributions to the margins. Major scenes and lines moved to Travis, Crockett, and Bowie. Accounts also point to casting for key Hispano-Texan figures. Instead of community voices, actors doing an accent, while Mexican heritage extras were rarely brought to the foreground. At the October 24, 1960 premiere, fanfare was loud, yet columns and local historians noted an imbalance. The heroism was there, the multi-ethnic fabric felt relegated to the footnotes. Later, the studio's shorter cut deepened the sense of two layers: the on-screen legend and the paperwork. If the Tejano debate starts here, the next turn lands on another siege and escape story, The Great Escape. Steve McQueen and The Great Escape. By summer 1963, the film's box office prospects and Steve McQueen's standing were said to ride on whether casting and set decisions around him stayed out of the headlines. In early 60s, Columbia notes, according to some accounts, vetoes on black scene partners in wide shots and demands for fully segregated workflows during The Great Escape appear in the margins, creating a paper map stricter than what reached the screen. Offstage, a second layer surfaces. FBI files are said to include tips about civil rights organizers and political asides tie McQueen to resistance to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. In private letters, reported language sketches, a deliberate hierarchy enforced by top billing. At premieres, John Sturgis's ensemble and Elmer Bernstein's score filled the room. In the paperwork, lines remained about who could stand where and on what terms. If film and documents truly tell different versions of the same escape, the next argument steps straight onto Civil War ground: Shenandoah. James Stewart. By early 1965, James Stewart's standing and the film's release plans rested on how Shenandoah would depict the war and who would be granted visibility in the frame. Where does family drama end and exclusion by uniform color begin? During the 1964-65 shoot, accounts say Stewart argued with director Andrew McLaughlin over showing black Union soldiers, insisting it would distort history. Production notes called for moving black extras back and avoiding shared close reactions. Co-star Doug McClure recalled Stewart, between takes, calling the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People troublemakers. Offset. Sources cite membership in the Conservative Motion Picture Alliance, resistance to integrating unions, and a 1964 gift to Barry Goldwater over the Civil Rights Act, details tied to an FBI file and period reports. A ranch account adds that until 1968, housing for white and Mexican workers stayed split, they prefer their own. On screen, "Oh Shenandoah" soared. In the papers, the march sounded different, toward studio memos and Major Dundee, Charlton Heston, and later speeches. By early 1965, Charlton Heston's billing and contract options hinged on who could share a close-up in Major Dundee. Where does heroic narrative end and exclusion by skin color begin? Studio paperwork from 1964 to 65, according to later accounts, notes efforts to trim Brock Peters' scenes and to avoid tight shots pairing him with Heston, justified as maintaining a single tone. A second layer shows up in union notes, resistance attributed to SAG proposals to equalize pay for black background players, while mid-60s contribution logs list donations to George Wallace and Lester Maddox, read by some as signals of priority rather than mere politics. In the press, Heston's persona stayed upright and above the fray. Decades later, the microphone changed the framing. Flint, 1998, where a hard line on gun rights sounded to some like principle, to others like continuity with earlier divides. Taken together, the outline holds. Next comes how those lines surfaced on another set. Sergeant Ryker. By summer 1968, Lee Marvin's deals and standing were said to hinge on who could share the frame on Sergeant Ryker. Where does hard-nosed professionalism end and exclusion by skin color begin? On that set, accounts describe Marvin snapping at a black extra, "Watch where you're going, boy," with several crew claiming they saw it. Offset, co-star Norman Fell recalled minstrel routines at private parties and episodes of blackface, harsh even by late 60s standards. Other tellings go further. Alleged donations to the American Nazi Party under aliases, a Confederate flag at home, and a 1965 Formosa Cafe remark about the National Guard, "Mo, down." In newspaper columns, he remained the emblem of tough strength. In paperwork and memories, the outline looked different. If the fault line starts here, the next turn shows how words on the page said it earlier. Spartacus, Tony Curtis, and Spartacus. By fall 1960, Tony Curtis's standing and access to shared close-ups was effectively traded against rules forming around Spartacus. Universal's 1960 staging notes, per later tellings, set limits. Don't place black partners beside Antoninus. Curtis, move black extras to the back. Replace certain doubles, each choice justified as preserving a single tone. On set, Stanley Kubrick and producer Kirk Douglas argued over blocking. Final calls, people said, bypassed the call sheet and were delivered quietly in hallways, where close-ups were truly decided. That fall, columns fixated on the Olivier Curtis bath scene while the promo machine sold an event. Meanwhile, biographers cite private remarks about Sidney Poitier and sympathies for candidates like George Wallace, sketching a through line of exclusion. At the October premiere, Alex North's score carried a seamless epic, yet paperwork still defined who appeared and on what terms. If on-film equality can't erase offset filters, the next debate reaches Paul Newman. By spring 1969, Paul Newman's release window and standing with Universal rested on how Winning and its promo track days were run. In 1968 SCCA schedules, Lime Rock Park included lists for tests and press days, according to later accounts, marked a safe lineup. Black drivers and mechanics were steered away from joint runs and photo sets with Newman. On set with director James Goldstone, talk of a single-frame tone surfaced, who appeared next to Newman in close shots, people said, was decided not only by the call sheet, but in quiet hallway edits. Off track, a second layer. Private notes reportedly took sharp aim at Jim Brown, while local debates over Connecticut school integration, 1966-68, cited resistance to changes too fast. Winning premiered with a clean legend of speed, yet the paperwork still set who could share the frame. Next stop, 1963, a police report and Warner files. Natalie Wood, studio files and a police report. By spring 1963, Natalie Wood's visibility and her studio terms hung on lines in production files and police reports. Where does scripted speech end and a real stance begin? Warner records from that year, in some tellings, noted decisions around doubles. Black stand-ins pulled or swapped. Group shots with Wood adjusted for a single tone, while a same-year police report logging theft complaints, nominally procedural, became press shorthand about her circle and discipline. On screen, a 1963 release carried a line with an ethnic edge toward a partner, filed then as in character, read now as part of a system where acceptable words and faces were set off camera. Inside, an alleged clause on doubles functioned as a color filter without explicit bans. If that outline holds, the next page waits in a 1959 letter, Hedda Hopper's voice, leading to Joan Crawford and a new set of names and dates. Joan Crawford, contracts and letters. Where does everyday star logistics end and a gatekeeping system begin? A 1959 letter to columnist Hedda Hopper used sharp language about the right audience and unwanted faces on set, while internal notes outlined corridor and dressing room passes, who could be near the star and who was routed elsewhere. Studio files also mention pressure around Dorothy Dandridge. The same single-tone phrasing explained why her involvement was easier to sideline than include. Offstage, the picture quieted but darkened. Tax filings and foundation reports speak of supporting a shelter that, until 1968, effectively operated along separate lines, charity with a threshold at the door. Los Angeles columns kept the image immaculate, yet when access rules are written on paper and postcards, those lines become the picture, if this pattern is read correctly. The next page turns to My Fair Lady. By fall 1964, Audrey Hepburn's public image and My Fair Lady's promotion were being set in office folders. Where does flawless poise end and a color filter begin? Production notes from 1964, according to later accounts, record refusals to work with black dance coaches and call sheet tweaks that moved black stand-ins to the background, each justified as preserving a single tone. Documents from the same period by the United Nations Children's Fund logged cautious visual edits. Don't foreground posters featuring black children, presented as universal messaging. Private letters reportedly contained a line about Sidney Poitier, too dark for a romantic lead, cited by biographers as an informal bar. Meanwhile, fall 1964 columns admired Givenchy gowns and the score. The screen looked flawless while paperwork decided who shared a close-up. Taken together, the quiet edits resemble a system without explicit bans. If drafts speak louder than fanfare, the epilogue asks how the classics are reread. By the late 1960s, the studio canon, and who was allowed to be seen, hung by a thread. If the screen sold the epic while the paperwork drew the lines of access, what exactly counts as the ending?